A very good morning to all of you. I welcome you all to session number 39 of ICF Sunday webinar series. And today's topic is the ins and outs of commissioning books. And our speaker for today is Anjana Chatterjee. She's a publishing professional with 20 plus years of experience. And I now would ask Anjana to give a slightly detailed bio or an intro about herself.
Sure. Thanks, Vivek. Good morning. Hello to everybody and good morning. I'm Anjana Saproo, and I'm going to be talking about the broad commissioning process that we follow for school books, textbooks, and trade books today. Okay, so I've been in publishing for donkey's years, more years than I care to remember, actually. And in fact, when I started my career in 1997 at Frank Brothers, there was no designation known as a commissioning editor. The editor did everything. So I was the commissioning editor, the development editor, the production editor, the project editor. So we all had a number of hats that we had at that point of time. It's only after many years in publishing, when I joined Sage Publications, is when I actually had the official designation of a commissioning editor. So I worked in India for a few years, and then in 2012, I went to Singapore and I joined a publishing company there called Marshall Cavendish Education. And I worked there for over 6 years. And then I worked in another digital education company because that time digital was very big in Singapore. So I joined that company. It's called Amden Consulting. And after that, in 2018, I came back to India and I started my own business. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, so let me start the presentation because according to Vivek, it's really very long. So I'm going to have to talk very fast. Okay, here goes. Okay, so I'm going to start with the very basics of what is commissioning and what is acquisition. So commissioning, so when a publisher decides to publish a book or a series or a title, that is exactly when the commissioning process begins. Okay. So it is within this commissioning process that the publisher would decide the parameters within which a book should be written. So what curricula are you writing it to? What is the age group that you have to cater to? What type of book is it? Is it a textbook, a workbook, a TG, a trade book, a book on business affairs, a book on policy? All these decisions are taken within the commissioning process itself. So then what is acquisition? Acquisition very simply is the buying of rights of existing books or series. So for example, about 4 or 5 years ago, this publishing company called Hodder, it's very famous, Hodder UK, actually moved to Singapore, opened up a shop there, and then they actually bought over the entire school list of Pearson Singapore. That is acquisition. So they acquired an entire list that had been actually produced and developed by another publisher for an X amount of money, and that's how they gained direct entry into a foreign market. So that is acquisition. Okay, so then in all this, what is the role of the commissioning editor? Okay, we often refer to commissioning editors as Cs as well. In Singapore, they were called acquisition editors, AEs, but it means the same. So the word is basically used, the phrases are used interchangeably. Now, the primary role of a commissioning editor is to advise a publisher on what to buy or what to publish. So every publishing house has a publishing list. So a publishing list consists of all the books that will be published between an X amount of time. It is generally for the current year and usually for the next 3 years, as far as school books and higher education is concerned. For trade books, the publishing list can't be more than a year old because it has to be very current and based on current business affairs, mergers and acquisitions and things like that. So it has to be very, very current. So for that, for a trade book publisher, the publishing list can only be for a year, only be annual. Okay. Now that is a publishing list. This publishing list is powered by the commissioning editor. So the commissioning editor, based on his or her understanding of the market trends of what is going to work in 2020, what is going to work in 2021, what are the students going to need in 2022, based on that knowledge, she actually builds a publishing list for the publisher. All right. Now, okay, let me move on a little bit. So basically, a commissioning editor is the source of all content ideas for a publisher. So if a publisher wants to publish something, she is the first stop. She is the person that they will go to. Okay. 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 So it's easy to say that the commissioning editor has to be able to project what is going to work in 2020, what's going to work in 2021, and the years beyond that. But how does she actually do he or she do that? How does the commissioning editor actually accomplish this? It's easy to just say project, but project based on what? So, okay, based on my experience in this line for over 20 years now, I have found that these are the top 5 skills. These are the top 5 factors that you need to follow if you really want to have a publishing list, a credible publishing list that sells. Because you don't want to produce books that just sit in the warehouse. You want to have a list that sells. Okay, so I'm going to talk about each of these factors in as much detail as I can and as much detail as time permits. So the first one is track competitors' books. So when I think about this, there is this proverb in the English language that keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. That is exactly what I feel when I think about competition analysis and competitors, because you really have to be very clued in as to what your competitor is publishing, what subject they're publishing in, what authors they are commissioning, and what kind of market are they actually trying to cater to, and because that reflects what the end user also needs, right? It's also an opportunity when you do competition analysis. It's an opportunity for you to see where you can go in, where you think there's a gap and your company can publish. Okay, or if the market is too crowded, maybe you want to do something different. So an analysis itself will give you a very clear idea about the start point for your publishing list. All right. Okay. So competition analysis is very closely linked to research of gap areas. And you have to do your research. I mean, I can't emphasize this enough. See, let me give you an example. In the school market, every publisher worth its salt, big or small, it publishes to the ICSE curriculum, the CBSE curriculum, nowadays the CAIE, the Cambridge curriculum, and there's the IB curriculum as well. So if everybody is publishing all of the books that are required in that curriculum, it's already an overcrowded market. So how is your book or your series going to stand out? What are the factors that you're going to be able to?
Anjana, Divya has a question. She has raised her hand. So, Divya, can you?
Yeah.
Yeah, my request would be, Anjana, could you please go a little slow?
Oh,
It is quite new process for most of us. At least for
okay.
me, it is quite new. I'm very naive in this.
No.
Although I have been working for Sage, but I have not worked in commissioning. So I would like to know more about it. So it will be helpful if you could go a little slow.
Definitely. I'll try.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm not surprised by that feedback, actually. I usually get it. Okay, so let me start again. Okay. So, you know what commissioning is? I've explained what a commissioning editor does. I've explained what a commissioning editor does. And let's talk about the actual process of how to commission. Okay. So, competition analysis is key. You have to be able to track who is publishing what, in what subject, um, what authors they're using, what is the package that they're providing. Because in school market, especially, you can't just produce a textbook. You have to produce a textbook, a workbook, a TG, etc., an ebook, a CD, video links, and stuff. If you're talking about higher ed, in higher ed is now not just important. It's not just enough to again produce a policy book or a book on business management. You also have to be able to support the professors, have your own workshops and things like additional things. But if your competitor is already doing that, you have to find different ways to deliver your product. So that's where your competition analysis will differentiate your product from the others. Price is an important factor. Remember, in the Indian market is very price sensitive. All right. So price is a very, very important factor. Now, when you do your competition analysis, you're basically doing research into the gap areas in a particular curriculum. All right. So, for example, since you're in stage, let me just take an example. If you're going to produce for political science, you need to go and look at not just the curriculum of political science, you need to look at the existing books that are there. Then you have to figure out what the bestsellers are. How would you figure out who the bestsellers are? You need to talk to the booksellers. You need to talk to the students. You need to talk to the professors. So you have to really talk about this entire process. So when I actually joined Sage, I joined as a head of the textbook division. All right, and I used to produce books for humanities, political science, international relations, psychology, business management. All of this was under my purview. But they did not have a publishing list that existed already. So that had pros and cons. So I went in, I had an open, clean field. I didn't have to, I had no precedent to follow. But I also didn't have a guide. So what I did was I spent the next 3 months working with my development editor and visiting every single, because this is the way back in the 2000s, early 2000s, the internet was of no use to us. It wasn't as advanced. So we actually went to Nai Sarak and all the different bookstores in Delhi. And we collected information about all the books that have been published in certain subjects, the name of the authors, who these authors are, what their credentials were, how many pages this book was, what the price of the book, what's the feedback from the bookseller, what books they think sells well. And of course, we talk to students as well to find out from them what books they liked and where they thought the gap was. And this gap document that we created at the end of 3 months actually helped us then decide where we should publish, what we should publish, and what our publishing list should look like. Okay. The other reason to do research is also very important is because when you go for your publishing meeting, as in when you've decided I want to publish, say, a book on business affairs, rural agriculture, and then you go into a publishing meeting and all your bosses are there and your peers are there and they want to know, and sales and marketing is there, their first question to you will be is, आपको ये book क्यों publish करना है? वो इसने भी किया है, उसने भी किया है, कैम्ब्रिज ने भी किया है, ऑक्सफोर्ड ने भी किया है, आपको क्यों करना है? And that is very, very a key question that actually decides the credibility of your publishing list. All right. So you must be very clear as to why you want to publish this book. Maybe because it's in the curricula. The number of students taking it are huge. You have huge numbers. You can sell more than 3,000. And why do you think it can sell more than 3,000 or 5,000? So then you have to have the points very clearly pointed out. You have a good author who knows what he's doing. There's one of them. You have features in the book that help give the student a very clear idea of how to tackle this particular paper. You'll have a manual which will also help them understand and do better. You'll have questions at the end of the book. There could be 100 things which you have to look at and decide for yourself. So as a commissioning editor, that's your responsibility. Study the competition, study the gaps in the market, and then build your publishing list. That makes it credible, and that makes it sell as well. Okay. So when you already decided that these are the 10 books that I'm going to publish, now you're going to have to match your books with your authors, right? So in the company that you work in, you will already have some existing authors. And then for some books, you'll have to actually find new authors. And with them, then you have to begin the discussion about how to go about the process of writing the book. Now, usually, this is extremely complicated. So let me give you an example. So in my early days as a commissioning editor, I would attend conferences or book fairs, and then I would meet some author, like a well-known author, and he's fantastic. He talks so well, and he knows his subject, and people really love him. And I'm thinking, wow, this guy can produce a bestseller for us. I'm in complete euphoria. And then when the sample chapter comes to my desk, and then I'm back to the ground with a big bang. So I'm brought back to earth with a big bang. And I realized that while he's an excellent professor, he and she is an excellent professor, he cannot write to the standard that is required. Because all good professors don't necessarily make good authors. Just like all great teachers don't necessarily make good authors, So reality check. And then what do you do? Because if you have a good name, you have like a well-known name, a name that can drive your sales, and your company wants you to have definitely commissioned this particular author, then what are you going to do? You can't just say, oh my God, the sample chapter is shit. And what am I going to do? I'm rejecting him. You can't do that. So this is where the skill of a commissioning editor comes into play. So what you have to do is break down everything in the sample chapter that does not meet the requirements of your book. Number one. Number two, list out the things very clearly, very, very clearly in a document. And then just don't email the document, because the author is going to freak out when he gets it. He's going to tell you, I've written many books before. Who are you to tell me all these things? So you really don't want to go down that road. So what you need to do is call him and tell him that you need to discuss the sample chapter. And while it's going in the right direction, there are certain things that have to be, changed, because we have to fight competition, etc. So you have to ease them into the process, especially if they are well-known authors or if they are first-time authors. It's the same. Everybody has their own ego parked in a separate room. So you have to be very careful about how you handle an author, manage your author. So know your author, or in other words, author management is a very important skill that a commissioning editor needs to have. So don't expect, as a commissioning editor, don't expect your sample chamber to be fantastic the first time. Probably the fifth time, yes, but definitely not the first time. Okay, so you'll have to manage your expectations, and you have to really develop your relation with the author. Talk to them, support them. If you have a development editor, get her to work with them to be able to do what you're trying to achieve. Get editorial support and things like that. Let me also say that most authors, okay, let me talk about the school market first, the school book market first. In the school book market, it's a typical profile of an author, all right? The author must belong to the top 10 schools in Delhi, a DPS or a DPS RK program or a Bluebells, okay? Speaks excellent English, has the credentials, but these kind of authors are rare to find, or they're already being commissioned by already working for other publishers exclusively, or they simply just don't have the time. But you want that author because you know that can help your book become a bestseller. So what do? So this is another tactic that you need to employ, is that you need to tell that author, either you give her enough time. If you can commission, if you have the privilege to be able to commission 1.5 years ahead of time, great. But if you need the book for a January session next year, then you don't have the luxury of time. Then you have to provide her with support. So maybe she would like to work with some other author, or maybe somebody, a friend of hers, or a research assistant if it's a high textbook, but somebody who is aligned with how she thinks and whom she does not consider to be competition, with whom she can work with, and you can help reach that balance. Help authors work with each other. Then the burden is divided, and the book will come out on time. And a lot of times, actually, in school books, I have seen, it's quite rampant, actually. We actually get the book written by somebody else, a lesser known author or a new time author. We get them to write the book, and then we go out and find a big name who then reviews the book and for an X amount of money, and then puts her name on it if she feels that the content is up to mark. So there are various ways to handle your authors. So no is not an answer, or this won't work is not an answer. That is like literally the very last resort, especially in a market when there are very, very few great, good authors that can help sell your book, whose name will help sell your book. Okay? All right. Okay, so the another job of a CE is to network, and network. And in fact, we always have this running joke in Singapore that commissioning actually starts after 5 p.m. Because during the day, really, you're just busy answering emails, attending meetings. So when are you going to commission? When are you going to talk to new authors? When are you going to talk to your existing authors and listen to them? And you have to spend a lot of time with your authors. You have to hear about their lives. You have to hear about the problems that they're having as to why they can't deliver your manuscript. You guys can't call up and say, okay, so where's my manuscript? It never works like that. It's a relationship, and it's a relationship of trust. So you constantly need to network. When I was in stage, I remember there was no weekend, there was no nothing. I mean, if an author called, you were there. If you needed to talk to an author on the weekend, you did it. If you had to visit his house, you did. Of course, things have changed a lot now. Technology is way more advanced now. And even for book fairs, I mean, I remember if we had to go to a book fair, like a Frankfurt book fair or a London book fair, I would have to start 4 months earlier, and start writing emails to people and hoping that they would give me an appointment and stuff like that. But nowadays, the book fairs have apps that actually matchmake you, based on what you're looking for. They actually matchmake you, and you can very easily just text anybody and they reply. It's so much easier now. It wasn't that. So you should take advantage of that, especially the new series or people who are or editors who want to become series. These are the things. These are the tools that you can use. Use the apps. Use the conferences. Choose the conferences with care. You don't have to go to all. But nowadays, there's a trend. Most of the teachers seem to be going to the tech conferences. So, for example, there's this conference called the BETT, in the UK. It happens every year in Jan, not in the COVID year, of course, but generally every year in Jan. And that's actually where you will find teachers who are looking to deliver their teaching digitally. And they want to find a simple way to do it. And now in the COVID era, this has become so much more critical to how a teacher operates and how a teacher teaches and engages her student. So pick your conferences with care. Don't go to all of them. And go to them because you can already see the list of attendees. So only if you feel like you can get something out of it, because of course you always have a limited budget. So then, just go then if you feel that you'll be able to bring back at least 10 leads. I mean, my boss in Sage Sagata used to say, you have to talk to 100 people, Anjana, before you can get even 10 leads. So that's 100 people that you have to talk to be able to get 10 leads that you can then turn into an author. Okay. Teacher training workshops are actually much easier, especially if your company is the one that is sponsoring them. Because then you have a captive audience of teachers. You just have to talk to them, hand out your card, ask them to get in contact with you if they want to write something. And you'll always have teachers who say, I've written this, I've done that. Do you think you can publish it? So there is a supply and demand both working at, which you can take advantage of. And then, of course, emails and cold calls. And especially now in the pandemic, I think the emails seem to work way better than anything else, simply because a lot of people are just tired of Zoom as well. Tired of constantly being on Zoom and tired of logging in. So if you email them, actually, I get the responses much faster nowadays. So those are a few ways to network. But keep your ear to the ground always. And don't just network. Oh, let me just say this. Don't just network to find authors. Network to find reviewers. Network for publishers. For freelancers. Network for designers. You need to network for everything, not just for an author. And also network in your own community. You can always talk to each other to do a series from the other companies. It's good to have an exchange of ideas. Find out, just talk, feel your way around. Things like that. That's also very important, to network within your own community. And then there is the insidious, as I call it, the insidious backlist. So one time I was in a publishing meeting, and I was vigorously, passionately pitching for this history series that I thought needed to be a commission. And here's the author, and I've done all this work, and they've done a sample chapter. And then the boss lady, turns around and says, Anjana, we have this book in our backlist. Just refresh it. Don't waste so much time and money. It's like, I have never been so embarrassed in my life. So that's the insidious backlist. So before you go commissioning, because we get all caught up with the commissioning and getting the authors and talking to them, just before you do that, just please check your backlist. In the backlist, you'll find two kinds of books. One is those that have expired, as in the date of publication to the thing has expired. So the curriculum has expired, maybe, so you can refresh them if there is a need for it. And the other is, of course, if there are new development trends, and then you can match it like the history say. For example, because the history doesn't change, right? So a history book or a geography book can easily be refreshed, and your existing authors can actually do the job. And it's not a whole big project on its own. So that's the backlist. Do we have any more questions? Otherwise, I'll get down to the nitty-gritties of commissioning for school books country-wise, city-wise, country-wise. Any questions? No? Okay, so I've talked a bit about the commissioning for the Indian schools, right? So you have three things. One is you have an overcrowded market. Every publisher is publishing for the ICSE, the CBSE, the CAIE, and the IB, right? But even within this crowded market, a lot of the publishers have maybe moved away and only produced regional books in regional languages, and have found success. They have produced atlases, and that has been the start point. For example, Frank was actually, my boss told me there, that we actually started, Anjana, with the atlas and the Hindi book. And the Frank atlas is even used by my son now, so many years down the line. So, some of those, you don't necessarily have to always fight in the crowded market, right? And then although all publishers do publish science, maths, English, history, geography, There are some publishers that are always known for certain subjects. So, for example, Oxford, Cambridge will always be sought after for their English books, Macmillan as well, right? Orient Longman, also good in English, but also good in environmental sciences, you know. Then Goel is very well known for maths. Frank's maths is also quite good. So these are the things that, so these are the trends that you need to have a look at when you're looking at the Indian publishing in the commissioning in the Indian market. Again, there is a lack of great authors. Most of the authors are taken, so you either have to poach or you have to build your secondary line of authors and get them to do the work. And in a lot of the Indian publication houses, I hear that it's the editors for writing. Actually, we're actually writing the books, and then somebody with a well-known name is putting her name, his or her name to it. And I know this to be true because I actually wrote this Macmillan series called the Busy Bee Environmental Sciences, and then somebody else's name, of course, went in. But then you're naive, when you're new in the publishing, you're naive and you do things out of passion and without really realizing the consequences of what you're doing. Okay. Now the other thing to so the second thing, the first one is so I've talked about the first one, first the gap, the overcrowded market. Now the second one is the NCRT. Now, when I was in Indian school publishing, NCRT wasn't considered competition at all. Till NCRT began to produce four color books for not just classes 1 to 5, but for classes 1 to 8. And then they sold those books for less than 50 rupees. So I remember sitting I was still in Frank then, now it is Frank Macmillan, I think Frank. And I remember sitting in a movie where the bosses were screaming, कि ये 50 रुपए में book बेच रही है, क्या करोगे तुम? You know? So the shock that somebody could actually produce a 200-page full color book and sell it for 50 rupees when we were selling it for 150 rupees, it was like a, as they say in Hindi, jhatka. It was a very big jhatka. But in the end, good content always wins. And that's why actually I chose that clip art over there, that your bullseye that you have to hit is good content. Because if you have good content, it doesn't matter whether you're NCRT or Frank or Macmillan, the schools will look for your books and the schools will want your books. So for a commissioning editor, your compass is good content, good editor, good authors, great workshops. These are the things that you need to work towards. Okay. Okay, now I'll talk about commissioning in Singapore and UK. Okay. So as I said, in 2012, I moved to Singapore and where I was commissioning. And I had a small team with me and I was in charge of humanities, actually everything excepting ALT. So all the subjects in school, whether there was science, social studies, everything excepting ALT. Now in SG, the market is very different. So you can't just wake up one morning and say, I want to publish an English series. It doesn't work like that. You can only publish if the Ministry of Education approves your textbook. Only then can it be used in any school in Singapore. And all schools in Singapore are government schools. There are private schools, but there are very little, like I think 14 or 15 schools. And Singapore's citizens are not allowed to attend private schools at all. All right. So you have a market which is controlled by the Ministry of Education. I mean, it boggled my mind when I went there. It actually boggled my mind. So that means, so this is what happens. In Singapore, the Ministry of Education will float tenders. So for example, take for maths. So they will float a tender for maths for years 1 to 6. But we only do 1 year at a time. So when the tender comes out, we actually, take part in the tender, but we do it for, say, year 1 and year 2 only. And then they will approve year 1, and then you can go ahead and publish. Then you can approve year 2, and you can go ahead and publish. So how does all this affect commissioning? Well, you have to find authors who are A, brave enough to talk to the Ministry of Education, and B, actually even want to engage with them. Because if you win the tender, the battle has only, I mean, it's like, the war is won, but the battle is still there. Sorry, it's the battle that you won, but the war is still there to be fought. So after they approve, supposing you won, so we won the maths tender, and then we went in with our team of editors, and then they showed us the sample that we had done, and then they tore it to shreds. So we are wondering why they even chose us in the first place. And then they said, okay, next time you come, the authors will have to come with you. Okay. So this is where then the problem will arise because A, your authors Right? They're teaching or they're consultants or they're busy. And most importantly, they don't want to go and talk to the Ministry of Education. So we really had to fight very hard to tell them if you don't come in, your books don't come out and you don't get any royalty. So these are the lists of the dates, and let's just go in all together and discuss everything. So when you're in a meeting like this, where you have the Ministry of Education, which is very scary, okay, because it's like whatever they say goes, and then you have the authors who have their own opinion, and you as a publisher are stuck in the middle. So you have to really be able to very calmly negotiate your way out of there. So it's a matter of give and take. If it's small things like move this picture here or replace this picture or just put it below, then it's okay. Nobody fights over it. But if it's a concept and they want the concept to be shown in a certain fashion and the authors don't agree, then you just have to tell the authors to accept the fact that this is what Emily wants. And they get to have their say in the TG because the teacher's guide is not approved by the MOE. So if they want to put in anything extra or different, they can do it in the TG. So you have to find ways to negotiate in the SG. So that's commissioning in SG. Of course, there's a lot more, but given the time, I'm going to move on. But if you want to know more, you can always write to me. Okay, now let's talk about the UK school market. Okay, the UK school market was also a huge eye opener for me. So while I was working in Singapore in Marshall Cavendish, the Marshall Cavendish tied up with Oxford University Press in the UK to publish primary mathematics books, because, and the reason they tied up with us, Oxford tied up with us, was because the curriculum had changed in 2014, and it was actually based on the curriculum of Singapore, because Singapore maths is really well known all over the world. And since the UK kids were doing quite badly at the international exams like PISA, the government decided to step in and change the curriculum completely and base it on the Singapore curriculum, maths curriculum. So that's how I found myself in the UK. Now, when you work with an external partner as a commissioning editor, you have to be very clear on what your role is and what the collaborator's role is. So, for example, in this particular deal, Marshall Cavendish was responsible for commissioning all authors, be it UK authors or be it Singapore authors. So it was our job to commission authors. And OUP would, of course, front everything, and they would do the sales, they would do the marketing, they would do the workshops, they would do the PD. So they basically took care of the sales, and we had to produce the content. But the content also had to take care of UK sensibilities. So, for example, in the Indian books, you can show pictures of cakes and toffees and things like that. Okay, this is completely not allowed in the UK market. So the books cannot have any junk food, any sweets, any cookies, nothing of the sort. And in fact, you have to be very careful about how you actually get the book done, because I remember in one of the books, in one of the maths books, there was this fish, and the fish, they were teaching subtraction. So they said this fish, there were two fishes and one fish died. And when a boy read that in the UK school, he just burst out crying, and there was a outburst, and there was, people were shocked that we would put something like this in a textbook. So you have to be very, very careful about the sensibilities and the culture in which you are publishing as well as a commissioning editor. So obviously it became very clear to me that we had to have editors, we had to have authors from the UK market looking at our existing series and then adapting that for the use in the UK schools, which is easier said than done, because you're trying to get I don't know. It's when you're trying to get a Bengali like me, say, married to a Tamilian or somebody in the south. I mean, there's a culture shock on both sides, And so this is exactly what I felt when I was doing this, because there was Singapore, and in Singapore the schools go to school at not before 6+7, and in UK the kids go to school by 4+5 by 5. So it's literally a 2-year age difference. So what they are studying in class 1 or grade 1, as they call it, is the same as a kid studying in Singapore at age 7. So the maturity level, the understanding, the motor skills are all very different. And we had to work within this and make sure that the pedagogy of Singapore was not, didn't get diluted. And yet, we had to make sure that, everything was as per UK sensibilities and acceptabilities. So it was a very big challenge. And we started this project in 2014 and we finished it in 2016. And but we were successful. So, I mean, it was worth all the hard work and pain. But if you do something like this, you have to be as a commissioning editor, you have to be very aware of which country you are publishing in, what the sensibilities are, what the expected level of language is. Because in the UK market, there are two other problems. One is that the parents don't pay for the textbooks. It is the school that pays for the textbooks. So the schools have limited budgets. So they don't buy a textbook for every kid. Every kid has to share. They buy workbooks for every kid because that can be shared. But for the textbook, there's one book for two kids. And this is very normal in public schools in the UK, you know. So it's a completely different world you're dealing with. Even commercially, when you cost for the book, commercially, people are not paying that. It doesn't mean just because you have 40 class students in the class that 40 kids are going to buy that book. You know. So those are the kind of challenges in the UK market. And but we survive. But as a commissioning editor, you when you're in a situation, you can't run away from it. So you just have to look for creative solutions. That's my advice. And the rest is you of course have to learn on the job. There is no manual about how to actually commission in such situations. All right. Any questions? Okay, then I'm going to talk about. Okay, I'm going to talk about the documents that a commissioning editor usually works with when you decide to commission a book. So I'm going to just skip this because we are running out of time and get into deep dive into the documents because this is going to take a bit of time. Okay, so these are the 5 basic documents that as a commissioning editor you will deal with at one point or the other. Of course, you may have more or you may have less depending on your company's policies. But more or less, I find that these are the basics. Book proposals. I'm sure all editors have some point have met with a book proposal. This is actually a communication document between the CE and the author, in which the author expresses what he thinks will work. These are the chapters. This is the competition. This is what I want to write about. This is the number of pages it's going to be at. And then the CE comes in and shares her experience and talks the author through the proposal. The proposal has to be very comprehensive because this is what you're going to take to the publishing meeting. So it has to be extremely clear. All the specs of the book must be in there. Is it single color? Is it two color? Is it four color? How many books do you have in a package? Is it a textbook, workbook, TG, ebook, whatever? Everything has to be very clearly stated. To the extent of even what paper you're going to use. What the cover is going to be. Is it going to be UV laminate? Is it going to be UV glossy? Every single spec has to go in there. Now, let me also say that what I just said is very true of SG and UK, but I don't know whether in the Indian market you are required to do such detailed proposals. But this, as I said, it depends on your company what they really want from you. But one thing I want to emphasize in proposals, because I see a lot of these proposals now, you have to be able to explain to your author that selling the book is not just the publisher's responsibility. All right. Nowadays, the author really needs to come in and help us sell books. And he can do that by using his existing network, his network in the school or the university, his colleagues, his blog, his Facebook. He should be able to, so you merely must explore these kind of marketing skills and marketing channels with your author. All right. It can't be just, okay, I think this book can sell 10,000. And as a CEO, thinking, can this book sell 10,000? Because the author obviously expects that the book will sell 10,000 copies, right? He's calculating his royalty in advance. But you have to say, okay, so where exactly are these 10,000 copies going to go? Who is going to buy them? So market savviness is not just for publishers, it's also for authors. And it's the commissioning editor's job to make sure that the author is aware of his responsibilities. Okay, author brief. Okay, author brief can be used in a few ways. I use it for internal communication with my editors. So, for example, I I would I would capture within the author brief. For example, this is the textbook that I want to publish. It's for this particular year. Say it's for class 8, and then it's for this subject. And these are the features it's going to have. And when you edit, these are the things that you have to look out for. That is very important in an author brief. So because it's for the consumption of the editor who finally edits the book. So they must know the language, how simple or complex the language should be. Okay, what age are you really catering to? Is very, very age appropriate. Age appropriate language is extremely important, especially in the school market in textbooks. and textbooks and workbooks. And also, when you edit, have a look at the competition as well. See how they did it and see how different you can do it. And this is not easy because editors have their own way of working. And when I was in Singapore, I faced it a lot. I faced a lot of pushback from the editors who tell me, we know what to do, Anjana. And I'm like, I know you know what to do, but I'm trying to do something different here. So just keep an open mind. It's not easy, but it works when they have a paper to then go back to refer to say, these are the features that are supposed to be in this book. Every chapter must have a fun fact, or every chapter must have X amount of questions, things like that. So that's the job of an author brief. You can also share the author brief with the author, I mean, because it's just taken from the book proposal in case he wants to add in something. Okay, now let's come to the scope and sequence, what we popularly call the SNS. I think in India it's called the VHP or the VHS or something like that. So this is a very, very important document. So supposing you're doing an English language book, right? And you say, okay, so it's a textbook, it's going to have, it has 3 units and every unit has what? That's when you need the scope and sequence. So scope and sequence will tell you that in each unit, you will have 2 prose pieces and a play, or you will have a play, a prose piece, and a poem. And what is the genre going to be? So is the genre of the prose going to be narration, opinionated? Is the play going to be a drama? Is it going to be a tragedy? All those details are there. What are the parts of speech that you're teaching? Are you teaching verb and noun in this particular unit? All those things. This is what the scope and sequence is all about, and we actually use it more in school books. Okay, in higher education, since you work to the curricula, you don't really need a scope and sequence, and in trade books, it's not really of any consequence because trade books is a totally different ballgame altogether. But for school publishing, this is like my Bible. This has always been my Bible. So if there is any confusion, I can always go back and say, hey, this is what the scope and sequence says. Okay. Now let's come to the dreaded red dragon, which is the budget. Okay. So we are all editors, right? We are editors, we are creative people, we're passionate people, and we don't like to use the numbers. But we cannot do without numbers. So you can't shy away from it. All right. And actually in India, right up the time I went to Singapore, I only had to, account for the editorial cost, as in what is the author going to do, how much royalties is the author going to take, how much is the freelancer going to cost, how much is the design going to take, and that's it. And then production would take care of everything. And then when I landed in Singapore, it was like my fourth day in the office, and they said, there's this book, there's a geography book, and everything is prepared, and it needs to go to print, and you need to look at the budget. And I was like, why do I have to look at the budget? Because we overshot. And now you have to redo the entire budget because we were only given 27 hours, but we took 47 hours. Which means, of course, the book is already, running at a loss, right? If you've already, busted the budget of the amount of hours that you were supposed to work on the book. And I was looking at the budget for a long time, for about good 20 minutes. And I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do? I have no clue how to do this. So I did what we call the Indian jugaad. I cheated. I went back and I found some old budgets of similar books done before. And then I looked at that and I looked at this one. And then I figured out, okay, so these are the numbers I can tweak. I can increase the print run maybe a bit. Maybe you don't have to print the TG. We can give it as an E. You don't have to always print the TG. You can save a lot of money if you don't print the TG. If it just goes as a PDF. So that's what I did, creative accounting, and then I got the budget done. But then I learned to actually have to do the budget. So in the budget, actually, the heads are always listed out, The heads are all listed out, like the print cost, the cover cost, the paper they used, the number of print copies, the print cost, the warehouse cost, the marketing cost, everything is in there. So you have to actually get quotations from the production department after you tell them that this is the book I want to do, this is the specifications of the book, and now please give me a print code, on 80 GSM, on 120 GSM, on 75 GSM, if you can get away with it, things like that. So you can't shy away from the budget. You're going to have to learn to deal with financial data. Look at the big data. Don't concern yourself with the small data. The marketing promotion percentage always remains the same, really. So but focus on the number of copies you're going to buy. Focus on amortization. Okay, let me explain that a bit. So some companies like to spread the cost of producing a series over a few years, like first 3 years, so that they don't have to absorb the entire cost in the first year. And some companies just like to absorb it in the one shot, as in they do it in the first year. So in the first year, they don't make any money, but they make money from the second and the third year because they've already, had them absorbed in the cost. So depending on what your company wants, or what the policy in your company is, you need to definitely look at the amortization, because that's where you can either save a lot of money. Paper also, you don't have to always have 80 GSM. You can get away with 70, 75 GSM at school books, so do have a good close relationship with the production department. It's very important, because the production guys can actually tell you a lot of these nitty-gritties of paper, cover, binding. They know they've been doing it for donkey's years, so they know, you know so that's how you have to tackle your budget phase on. Or you can cheat like me and look at the previous budgets and try and get away with it. Okay. So after you have got your proposal, your author brief, your scope and sequence, your sample chapter, your budget, and then you go in for the publishing meeting and you have successfully managed to get it passed, that's when the time for the contracts arrive. Now, in India, I generally see that the contracts come from the legal department for the HR department, so you don't have to do much to it except to give me the name of the book and the royalty. But there are a few things that you must, as a CE, look out for in a contract. So I'm going to just list them very briefly. Okay, we have time. I'll list them very briefly. So the first thing is, of course, the time of submission. Name of the book, the date of submission. So you must have a proper schedule in the contract to say when each book is coming in. What is the date by which information is coming in? Okay. Please account for revisions. In school books, especially, and in higher ed textbooks, the curriculum changes. And then the original author will always not want to ever revise anything. Okay, or maybe busy, doesn't want to do it. So please make sure that you insert the contract that he is liable to revise. And if he doesn't want to revise, well, here's a trick. If he doesn't want to revise, fine. You can get somebody else to do the revision, but then you have to deduct the money that you pay the second author from the royalty of the first author. So that's another way of dealing with it. Dealing with recalcitrant authors who don't want to do revisions. Okay. Put in the payment schedule. The royalty must be very clear. And please also make sure of one thing. The royalty is not just for the print. Okay, supposing your book only has print, it doesn't have e. Even then, please account cover from all e versions as well. It's very important, because eventually at some point, just like when we were doing print, we never thought about ebooks, right? And then the ebook, the ebook flood came, and then we had to also provide ebooks to the schools, but we didn't have the copyright to do that. We only had copyright for the printed books. So you must account for all possible derivatives, be it e or any other version that might come out in the future. Make sure the copyright belongs to you. In Sage, of course, we don't have that thing. I don't know whether we have it now, but when I was in Sage, we only had publishing rights. We didn't have copyrights. So the author gave us the right to publish his book for X amount of years, but the copyright always rested with them. I don't know whether that's have changed now. So depending on your company's policies, you have to see that in the contract. Okay. Payment schedule of royalty also must be very clear. The division, if there are one or more, if there are two or more authors, then please make sure that the payment schedule reflects who gets what, because that is also always a bone of contention. All right.
Yeah,
Now I'm going to talk.
Anjana,
Yeah.
Michelle has a question. Like you mentioned, these 5 documents.
Yeah.
So where can one get access to these documents for an idea what they look like?
Okay, I can. Well, you can either wait for my book, which comes out at the end of the year. It will have all the templates for all these kind of documents. But if you're in a company, your company would have these book proposals, scope and sequence, budgets. I mean, they would generally always have it, right? The companies, the publishing companies themselves. And if you're not in publishing, but you are interested, you can go online. I'm sure there are templates and free templates out there. Just Google. All right.
Yeah, thanks, Anjana.
You're most welcome. Okay, I'm going to quickly talk about. I know I have only 10 minutes, and I definitely want to take questions. So I'm going to quickly just rush through trade. Okay, there are two things about trade. In my experience, because I worked in the trade books in Business World. So Business World, is a magazine, right? Business magazine, and they had a textbook. They had a books division. All right. So when I was in trade, I realized trade books have a very short shelf life, right? So you have to focus on the current. All right. So you have to look at the scams, the mergers and acquisitions, the big businesses, the big businesses that have grown, the businesses that have fallen, stuff like that. Case studies is always topical. Nowadays, social media is very big. And in fact, we have one of those authors over here, Ramjas Shenoy, who's doing books on social media management and performance management and digital management, digital performance management. These things are very, very important. I mean, there are things that readers want to read about nowadays. So you have to be your topic has to be very, very topical. And you must be able to exhaust your print run within a year. That is very important for the trade books. At least the ones I did. All right. And the other thing is the why. See, the who and the why is very important, because over here, when you do trade books, at least I used to work with all these very well-known CEOs, well-known columnists, investigative journalists, and they also have a separate room where they park their ego. Okay, so you have to really treat them with kid gloves. All right. So I used to, in the beginning, take a senior with me to go with me. So my senior was he was the editor of the magazine, so he used to go with me. And I used to talk, but he used to be there so that, he doesn't turn on, the author doesn't turn on and say, who are you? What is it you want? You know. So handle your authors carefully. And anyway, trade book authors generally also expect a big, glitzy launch of their books, which we did. So we used to do. So that's also one point to take into account. And the other thing is, again, you don't have to do everything all over again. So, for example, Business World had this very, very popular series called the Marketing White Book series, Marketing White Book. So this was an annual series which was sell like hotcakes, and many companies actually advertised in that book. It was a really fantastic book. Then when I joined my Business World, SMEs were very much in the trend. As in, there was a lot of buzz around SMEs and what they're doing and what they're trying to do. So then what we did was we just extended the white book concept to this SMEs. So then I came up with the SME white book concept, SME white book. And that also sold like, hotcakes, because there was very little information in one place about SME financing, opportunities for SMEs. What are the new revenue channels in SMEs? So things like that. So you can also have these kind of annual publications that people will know your brand for. And then again, case studies. We also had a great case studies annual book that came out. It was done by Meera. I forget the name. I'm getting old. But it's very famous, Business World's case study books. So case studies is always in fashion in terms of fashion. Trend is a trend always. So that's for commissioning trade books. So be current, look at current affairs, and try and get people who are also part of the situation. So, for example, I remember this book on Harshad Mehta. Harshad Mehta, the great scamster, the great Indian scamster. Okay, but the book was written by Sucheta Dalal, and only she could have written that word with credibility, because she knew him, she had worked with him, and then she investigated him. So when I choose a book like that on something like a scam, I would want to know it. I would want to hear from people who are actually part of it, not somebody who doesn't know anything about it. It's just writing a academic thesis on it. You know what I mean? So be careful about who you choose and why you are choosing your authors for the commissioning trade books. Okay. Okay, Vivek, I have 5 minutes, right? Okay, I will just quickly say one line about the higher education textbooks, and then you can, share this slide with the participants later. So the higher education textbook market has changed dramatically over the few years. Okay, while this market used to be extremely print driven, it has now embraced all e-formats. And one of the biggest game changers is now the open access platform and the open science platform. Okay, so how does this impact commissioning editors? Let me give you an example. So Cambridge University Press for the last 5 years had been publishing non-commercial science content that everybody could download and or print or whatever, right? But now they have stopped it. You know why? Because the funding, because of open access and open science, the funding that was available previously to publishers through subscription revenues is now available directly to institutions and authors. So the commissioning editor is under an additional pressure now to produce commercially viable products. And this is one of the things that will actually dictate how the higher education movement, the market survives in the future, and how commissioning editors deal with this big change. Okay. If you want to know more, please write to me. Okay. Okay, Vivek, I'm going to stop talking now. And should I stop sharing as well?
Yes, yes.
Okay. My details are at the end of my PPT when you get it. You can get it and call that to me. Okay.
So very comprehensive presentation by Anjana, and it's now over to the audience to come up with their questions and queries.
I can see somebody said Subhash Panikar. For budgets and financial data, different companies have different formats. Very true. And print runs pricing profitability, especially in proprietorship companies in India, are policy decisions, as in decisions that are made at management level. So that's what I said. So I was not used to it. The management made these decisions. I only had to provide for editorial cost. But it's when I went, but it's different in the foreign markets like in Singapore. You have to be responsible for everything. There was one very common phrase that we were always told when we had our, when we first came to the company is that you are the CEO of your own desk. So that means you're responsible for everything, from the people in your team to the finances of your team. So it's a little bit different in the Indian market, definitely. Then amortization is generally frowned upon by CAs in India, Madhav and PK. Okay. Yeah, again, it's a policy decision, So it all depends on you. I mean, in Singapore, we used to do it. It was like, because we had ministry tenders, right? And so if you've been the tender unit for 12 years, so you can actually take 3 years to absorb the cost, and then, so you don't have to so you can make some profit from day one. Otherwise, you won't be able to make profit from day one. So everybody has their way, or every company has their way of looking at it. So there's no hard and fast rule there. So I'm just sharing my own experience.
Garima raised her hand. So Garima, you can ask your question.
Yeah. Hi, Anjana. I just wanted to know,
Hi.
were there
Hi.
any specific challenges that you faced moving from an Indian market to a foreign market, or from Indian publishing to foreign publishing? Something that you.
Yes. I mean, the challenges are huge. First of all, we Indians, right? Um, we are workaholics in the sense that we don't look at the time generally when we work, all right? So we work and we work and we go home and we work. And this is very much frowned upon in Singapore. So my editors used to tell me, Anjana, there is something called work-life balance. This is a phrase that I've learned in Singapore. Work-life balance. So we don't understand what is it that you're trying to do. I think they were scared that because I stayed overtime every day, they would be asked to stay overtime. So that's one challenge, is that you have to be able to do your work. It's a lot of work, managerial work, attend meetings, do emails, firefight, and still be able to leave at 6:03. 6:03. That was one big challenge. But I mean, jokes apart, the main challenge is always the working culture. So when you go to a fund to Singapore, I mean, the working culture is very different. People have different expectations from you, you know, and everything has to be on paper. So supposing there were 5 features in the book, right? And I forgot to mention the fifth one, or I just mentioned it, but I didn't give detail. They will come back to you even after 3 months and say, this is incomplete. We're not going to accept it. We're sending it back. So paperwork is very important in Singapore. You have to be able to fill out everything, and that's a lot of time. But I also realized that after I got used to doing it, putting everything on paper, I realized that it makes the process very vigorous, and that you can't say that you forgot or you slipped your mind. It's there in the paper, so there's no getting away from it. And then, as I said, because you can't publish in the open market, you have to always be on very good terms with the Ministry of Education. It is not easy. So I'm sure they blacklisted me somewhere because I talked too much and I was tactless and I was blunt. And but sometimes when the books are stuck, I mean, what do you want to do? I mean, how many changes you want to make? There is nothing called 3 proofs and we are done. There's always like 12 proof, and then I have management yelling at me and saying, Anjana, what's going on? But they also know ministry is that way. So you have to adjust yourself to the key players, the key stakeholders in that market, wherever you go. That's what you have to do. You know.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You spoke about the digitization in higher education markets just some time back. So, what are some of the formats or product models which are working or which are successful right now?
Well, open access is extremely obviously because it's open to everybody, right? So you can go onto a particular website, open access, and you'll find all the books there from Cambridge to Oxford. Every single publisher is right there, and you can download the extracts and stuff like that. So open access has made it very. So obviously you will subscribe to a website that has 4 different books rather than just one publisher who has maybe 50 books or 100 books. So open access has really, really changed the market. And you can go online to see that Cambridge, Oxford, they all have their own as well. They have their own digital platform as well. But they also all subscribe to an X amount of open access platform as well. Cora, hi.
Hi. How do you decide, what to pay an author? How long do you give him to do the book, or does this depend
Okay.
on how many books are sold on the print run?
Okay. So basically, if in the school market, uh, the it's always based on royalty. So previously, in the good old days, the royalty used to be 12 to 15% on the gross price of the book. But as the markets have got difficult and more complicated, now the loyalty has actually gone down to a single digit, like 5, 6, 7% on net price of the book. All right. So that means if the book is for $100, you get $10 backs, right? Because you have to pay discount to the bookseller as well. The bookseller takes a huge chunk of discount, before they can actually agree to sell your book. So all these do influence what you pay the authors. The other thing is that authors nowadays don't really want to get into the royalty process. They prefer, because it's a risk, right? You write the book today, it gets published a year later, and then it takes another year to sell, and you don't get the money for 2 years, right? If you're in a royalty agreement, right? So a lot of the authors are now opting for upfront payment or one-time payment. But one-time payment is a very big risk for a publisher. Simply because I give you money, right? You write the manuscript, I accept it, I pay you. But what if I want changes? What if the syllabus changes? What if I want to extend and write some more practices? And how do I do that? Because you may not want to do it because you already got your payment. So you have no affiliation to that book really, apart from your name being on it, right? So then the way around that, a way that I think works for both publishers and authors is that you can take an advance against your royalty while you're writing the book, so that you have money that tides you over till your actual royalty starts to come in. And then that money that you took is an advance and will be adjusted against your royalty. So what I'm telling you this as an author, you can want X amount of things, but you will need to go into negotiation with the publisher to say what you want. You want royalty, how much royalty you want, and or you want upfront, things like that. As far as the schedule is concerned, generally we should be commissioned a year or a year and a half before. All right. So if your school session begins in January, that means your promotions must of the book must begin somewhere in October, November. So you basically, if they commission you in January, you have from January to July to write the book. There's always a very, very short period for school books to be written. Unless it's like 1 year ahead, then okay. Then you can write from the previous January to July, and then the book can go start being promoted in November for next year January. So there's not a lot of, at least in school books, there's not a lot of time. Which is why we tend to have a lot of authors. One does a textbook, one does a workbook, one does a GG. Because everything has to move simultaneously at some point. Time is always a factor. But this is for school books. For higher ed, there's definitely, generally 8 months to a year, you definitely have. And also, I feel that when you're a higher ed author, you already have a lot of the matter written already. It's just a question of putting it in the structure. Because you've been teaching for a while, you know what you want, things like that.
And how do you
Can I answer your
maintain the
question, Mona?
content? And you've given them a brief. How do you maintain that they
Yes.
give you the content you want? How do you determine that?
It's very, very difficult. In school books, you can just look at the LOs and you can look at the competition and say, okay, this is good or this is not good enough. Or you give them 5 pages and they cut it down to 2 pages. It's
You
all about
waited like
negotiation
6 months,
points.
a year for the content, and then if it comes out looking like crap, what do you do with it?
Okay, then you don't wait 6 months. That's the first thing. That's the very first thing. So if you've given them the sample chapter and the sample chapter is approved, and then they start sending in everything in batches, right? So you have to examine every single batch, even if you've already signed up on the sample chapter content. Because for sure, their first chapter and second chapter is brilliant, and then the quality starts to fall in the third and fourth and fifth. So you have to constantly check. You can't wait for 6 months till the end of the book. Then you're dead in the water, right? Especially because you have a schedule to publish to. Yeah. So you have to constantly track. But then it won't be your responsibility as a C, right? Because you've already handed over the project to the editorial. So the editor is the one who has to chase the development editor, the one who has to chase the author constantly and check. And if there's any problem, then they will come to you and say, look, he's not following the brief. And then you get into a negotiation with them, with the author. Okay, I'm sorry.
Anjana, yeah, Anjana, there
Yes.
is a comment by Jyotirmoy which he sent to me on WhatsApp actually. So he said
Yeah.
I should have been in Anjana's session 15 years back. Now it's too late.
Jyotirma, it's never too late. If you want to start a publishing house with me, come talk to me.
Okay, I'll write to you. Anyway, I'll
Yes,
chat with you.
right, Jyotirma, no problem.
Yes, Sanjeev Sareen is asking whether you use freelance copy editors.
Oh yes, all the time, all the time. Are you
Wonderful.
asking for my business or are you asking for generally? Generally, publishing houses cannot have enough good freelancers, really. And in fact, okay, I forgot to mention this, but one of the ways to when you're doing a couple of projects, like you're doing English, math, science, and you only have like four editors, and what you're going to do, four subject editors, then you outsource. You know, nowadays, like businesses like mine, we offer the service of authoring, producing, designing, illustrating, proofreading, and giving you the final PDF. Of course, you will be checking at your end for everything, but it's a turn. We take it as a turnkey project. So if you give us, if you tell us in say January this year that I want you to write an EVS book or an EVS series and for ICSC, and then you give us a brief, we'll give you the sample chapter, you can approve it, and then you can actually write the book and produce and give you the final PDF by October. And mine is not the only company. There are a lot of Indian companies that are doing that. So freelancers, I think the freelancers have a lot of opportunity now, especially in COVID times. So keep your eyes open. Write to. There are a lot of people in the ICF group that you can write to. Right, there are a lot of them are in publishing. You can look online for freelance opportunities. I think it's a freelancer's world now, because also the big businesses are cutting down. Now they're not hiring that many editors anymore, really in-house editors anymore. They are surviving through freelancing, and even in Singapore. I mean, Marshall Cavendish had this huge, like 90 subject team. When I joined, there were 90 editors, and when I left, there were hardly 40. Because businesses change, right? And as you grow, you need to cut down your overheads inside the company. So the first person who gets affected is editorial, always, because there are enough freelancers. And then, of course, the ones you fire are the ones who will freelance for you, right? So that's how it works.
Deepthi has a question. How do you try and
Okay.
ensure your content is a cut above the competitors? So, as a commissioning editor, how much research into syllabus requirements do you need to do?
Oh, you must know the syllabus in your book of fingers. There's no two ways about it. It's school books. I'm sorry. I mean, I had to learn, and I've learned. So it has to be on the tip of your toes, of your fingers. You should know your syllabus in and out. Because if you know the syllabus in and out, and then you can compare what your competitor is doing versus what you will do eventually. So, say, like I said, most of the books will have fun facts, and I don't know, those things which I feel may make no sense. Those small boxes next to the content, we tell you extra facts, which I feel is, is redundant in this day and age when the kids are always online. They know all these things. They don't need to do it in a textbook. So, give them video links. You know, if you want features, give them video links inside, embedded inside the book. Just give the link there, let them go and explore on themselves. Things like that. So you and your competitors are already doing it. So you just have to look at that. There are ebooks that are being given free. I hear the LMS is sometimes given free, that they only charge for the content but not for the LMS, the schools. So there are various ways to beat your competition. You know, you just have to find out what you want.
Anjana, do you want to mention something about the business development?
Business development. Okay, just one second. Let me just put my dog out. Sorry.
Yeah, do you want to mention something about the business development that you have been doing for publishers? Have you thought about extending that service to freelancers? Because I think they need this service a lot.
Yes, actually, I have been thinking of connecting, like building a whole data bank of freelancers and then connecting them, matchmaking them to publishers who may need them. So obviously I'm always in touch with publishers, so I know what they need, and they also ask me, do you have an editor for this, do you have an editor for that, can you suggest a managing editor? So I was thinking of doing something like this. But what I currently do is this: if there are publishers in India who want to sell their products abroad, right? So they want to sell it in Europe, they want to sell it in the Middle East, they want to sell in Singapore. Then I have to connect them because I have networks, because I've lived a lot there. So I have network in Europe and Southeast Asia, and I connect partner to partner. So the Indian partner to a foreign partner. and then I help them do the deal about what is it they want to do. For example, one of my partners, one of my publishers wanted print orders from Singapore, so I connected him with a few people in a few publishers in Singapore, and it wasn't easy because nobody wants to print with India. There are issues; it won't reach on time. There's quality issues, and China prints better. But actually, over time now, India has been able to offer very competitive rates, and we were able to actually negotiate a very good rate, very good deal with an existing SG publisher and get huge print deals. And then I take a small percentage of that contract, of the value of the contract, very small percentage. So that's what I do right now. But yes, Vivek, it has been on my mind now simply because a lot of people ask me about, do you have a managing editor? I know one children's book publisher was looking for a editor, good editor. Um, so yeah, it would be good to have a matchmaking app, as you say, as a book fairs app, to match freelancers to publishers. So it's on my
Yeah,
mind, and maybe
yeah, but Jyotirma is mentioning that he found the matchmaking apps at the Frankfurt Book Fair difficult to navigate. He didn't know where to begin. Like the
okay.
apps
Next
were.
time we do. Why? Okay, next time we. Okay, it's going to come up soon. I'll help you. Why did you find it
Yeah,
difficult?
no, no. So last year during October, I kind of signed up to all those stuff. It
Yeah.
was probably too big. I don't know, vast. I don't know where, whom to talk to, what to do, sort of stuff like that. Because I probably am
Okay,
not used to it.
that's fine.
So
So
probably
everybody's not used.
so let's say a linear system like LinkedIn, where I'm contacting people, they're talking to me, is easy to deal with.
Yes.
But in that
Yes.
app atmosphere,
Right.
suddenly all over the world people were out there, but I didn't know why I
Who
was
was
there
what?
probably, or what to do, that sort of thing. And it was also
Right.
complicated. I thought it was complicated in the sense that tech, there's so much of stuff happening there. So what I'm trying to say,
Right.
see how I'm saying. So I find LinkedIn easy to work because okay, it's one to one kind of thing.
Yeah,
I
it's one to
I
one. One
I
to one.
talk to somebody, they talk to me, then we start a
They talk to
conversation.
you.
But here suddenly you are in a
Yes.
see, even in the trade fairs, I never knew what to do. Okay, how do you get
Okay.
business out of a conference, a trade fair, whatever. So this is the same concept. This is just they're putting it online, right? So maybe that's part of it. Is just not the technology.
Yes.
So I'm coming from
It's
that.
not
It's
a
very
technology.
broad. It's very broad. So it's a great idea what you're saying about this matchmaking app, and it really helps all of us
Yes.
who are working solo now all over the place. So it's a great,
Yes. Yes.
and that's why I'm
Yes.
saying if it can be a simple interface and maybe a little bit of training also of how do you engage and how
Yeah.
do you get into the whole game. That's all.
How do you get into all
Yeah.
this?
So that's my thought.
No, I totally get your point. Okay, just one tip from how to use the Frankfurt app because I also found that I know it's been difficult in the beginning. Just go by subject. So they list the number of people who are right. Go by subject. So if you're looking for a particular subject and you filter it by subject, and only the people who are associated with that subject will show up on that list. And then you have to filter, but you do have to filter. That much is
Okay.
there.
Okay.
That one. And yes, this marketplace, I am thinking very seriously. And if I do start it in the next 3 months, I will take ICF Self and Dr. Venkat Self and Jyotirmoy, definitely you. And then, because then people can write to you now with their CVs and etc. And then I can start building the app, right? And then I'll put in the publishers. Yeah. Okay, that's
Anjana,
perfect.
what is the typical
Yes,
rate
go ahead.
for school book edit? What are the typical rates for school book editors, freelancers? What kind of rates do you get for
Okay.
these kind of?
I mean, yeah, I'm just trying to look at mine because I have a standard thing. So I say, I go by pages. Okay. So 5,000 pages,
250 words?
$10,000. All right. So two, sorry. 500, no, it's
Normally
pages.
your page is
So
250
200
words, right?
pages is between 5 to 7,000. 250 words. So 200 pages. Just editing. Huh? This is just editing. That means it's only one time. All right. So for between 300 to 500 pages, 500 pages also I don't go. 300 pages is about 5 to 7,000. Actually, I have a. Can I send it to you guys later? I have a whole chart by which I go to. I mean that's my rate chart. I can share it with you.
I mean, will we talk about a standard page of 250 words and or maybe a word count? How would you talk it?
No, I take it by page Because
Okay.
sometimes 250
But do
words
we
and sometimes
standardize the
the
page at
page is
250 words? Or because a lot of people do single space and then the word count goes up.
yes. What goes up, and a lot of people will then say that there was an illustration in that page, so it doesn't count. So you have to count two pages as
Yeah.
one page. All those things they do. So I don't go like that. I just say I edited 200 pages, and this is my thing. I don't care how many words were in there. But 200 pages, and this is my rate. So I have my rate. I don't remember it offhand. Sorry. So I'll send that to you. I'll send it to Vivek, and I'll send it to you, and then you can put it in the group. All right. Okay, Cora. Or Cora, you can just write to me. I can send it to you. Just drop me an email. I'll send it to you. Okay.
So, do we have any more questions before we close the session?
What's
I
the
hope
email?
everybody liked the session. I hope
What's
you all
the
liked it.
email?
Oh, what's my email? Okay, let me share again. Let me share my screen. Yeah. So those are all my emails. All right.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful
Welcome.
session.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you for listening on a Sunday. I always appreciate that. What you said.
So
Logging on.
next week we will have session number 40, and it will be on MS Excel, part 2 of MS Excel. Like we already had part 1 by Murugaraj Shanmugam, and we started this series initially as a 40-minute 40 session series, but now it looks like we will have to have at least maybe 50 sessions, because a lot of topics are still to be covered, a lot of speakers are lined up, and we have the Saturday travel series also going on. Although this Saturday our session will be on editing of front matter of books and editing of notes. So that session will be by Ujjwala Vaidya. So I hope all of you will join that session also. It will be
What
at
time will it
2.
be on Saturday?
Yeah, it will be at 2 p.m. Like normally our Saturday sessions are at 4, but as an exception, we are having it at 2 p.m. on the speaker's request, and sometimes we need to accommodate that also, because it's not easy to get like expert speakers for all the topics. And thanks, Anjana. Thanks a lot. Thanks to all the
My pleasure.
participants.
That's
And
completely my pleasure.
before we end, I would like a comment from Atri Chakra Borty, because she has been taking notes very diligently. So maybe she can
That's
she
great. That's great.
she can share something about what she has been writing.
Please.
Actually, I have been taking notes and then I realized that you will be sharing the thing with
Yes.
us, but I
Yes.
still like to take
Yes.
notes. It's the
Yes.
thing. I've just been
No, it's
taking
nice.
things to,
It's
yeah. Yeah, so I
great. That's
I
great.
am an editorial intern till now. Like today is my like last day of internship. So I'm just still like learning how things are going. So I've been learning a lot of things in the past 6 months, but this has been really informative and like I really liked it. Thank you.
Thank you so
This
much.
was
It
really
really
good.
does. Thank you.
Thanks,
Stay in
Atri,
touch
and
with me.
all.
If you need any advice, stay in touch with me on email. If you need any
Yeah.
advice, any career advice, or anything,
Yeah.
please feel free to write to me. It'll be my
Thank you.
pleasure to respond.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks everyone. Have a nice day.
Bye.